My name is Sarah Caldwell, and today I'll be doing a voiceover presentation for Richard Wright's Native Son. In Native Son, Richard Wright creates a daunting narrative truly unlike any other in the African American literary canon that writers attempt to emulate in the decades following. Overall, his work serves as a social commentary on the hardships and inevitabilities of the downtrodden lives of Black people in the ghettos of Southside Chicago as well as the rest of the country. Unfortunately, the critiques and social commentary are still relevant. The following work will analyze the literary genre, themes, characters, and symbols used within Wright's Native Son. In addition, this work will provide comparisons to current instances of poverty caused by white racist capitalism and the unequal distribution of wealth leading to the dehumanization and ghettoization of urban Blacks. Richard Wright was a Black communist naturalist writer. Accordingly, many of his works explore the intersections of impoverished Black life, fate, capitalism, and communism. Wright's work depicted Bigger Thomas among many others who were poor, Black, and had no free will or advancement opportunities. Throughout the novel, Bigger faces 5 of the 7 primitive struggles of humankind: human versus self, human versus human, human versus society, human versus nature, and human versus fate. Bigger exists in a society that is indifferent and often callous towards him because he is poor, Black, and uneducated. Unlike many of his Black contemporaries, Wright's Bigger Thomas is also a generally unlikable character with few, if any, redeemable characteristics. In doing so, he forces readers to consider the worst that men become when they are stripped of their humanity and subsequently any semblance of opportunity, education, or dignity. Because he does not apologize for Bigger's criminal deeds, he presents the inevitability of them in such a racially oppressive and corrupt socio-political system. Themes in many of Wright's works include racist capitalism, well-intentioned communism, forced ghettoization of poor Blacks, and the inhumanity of abject poverty. His work also explores white philanthropy, superiority complexes, and racist perceptions. In Native Son, capitalism and communism are continually juxtaposed. Capitalism is depicted as a cruel economic system that oppresses Blacks, while communism represents a refuge for the poor and oppressed. Ultimately, Wright's work illustrates that both systems are inherently white and would therefore appear the same to Bigger Thomas, a young Black man marred by violence, fear, and hatred. Because he has only experienced the worst of this capitalist society, communism seems obsolete because of its perceived disingenuousness. Additionally, Wright's work depicts self-awareness and emotionally informed communication as a Black man's saving grace and as a white man's greatest fear and enemy. Bigger's communist lawyer explains that to him when he says, "The people that hate him feel just as he feels, only they're on the other side of the fence. You're Black, but that's only part of it. Your being Black, as I told you before, makes it easy for them to single you out. They want the things of life just as you did, and they're not particular about how they get them. They hire, rule, and regulate life. They do that to Black people more than others because they say that Black people are inferior. But Bigger, they say that all people who work are inferior. But deep down in them, they feel like you feel, Bigger, and in order to keep what they've got, they make themselves believe that men who work are not quite human." As evidence in the quotation, Max communicates what Bigger has always felt and intrinsically known to be true. He can survive in a white world that cherishes capitalism and its racist idealism more than it has even considered his existence. Bigger Thomas is a young man with no country and no reprieve. He is predestined for poverty and criminality from birth due to his lack of education and ability to effectively communicate or empathize with others. At his core, he is the epitome of the outcast and unbalanced archetype. His living in a crowded, rat-infested, one-room tenement shows how he is repeatedly denied privacy, autonomy, and human necessities. In fact, Wright's opening rat scene becomes a symbol of Bigger's experiences throughout his life in the city, as he frantically and menacingly scurries about, causing madness and inciting violence and fear in his wake. Because he is Black and has an 8th-grade education, he is often underestimated by whites, who view him as a beast of burden. Despite this, Bigger is cunning and aware of his predetermined fate and the brutality of white capitalism. He is continually described as a primitive being who is motivated by sex, fear, and violence. He is enthralled by movies and play acting. As he continually acknowledges, his gloomy fate is already set regardless of his best intentions because he was born poor and black in a society where he is criminalized by whites and feared by blacks whom he terrorizes. Biggers is presented as a shiftless individual who refuses to work despite threats that his family may no longer be given relief benefits. He is a reactive individual and an egotist who is unsympathetic to anyone else's humanity because his own has been taken away for so long. He continually prioritizes himself above others, even if they appear to care or understand him. Consequently, he cannot openly discuss his feelings and often becomes aggressive whenever he is approached to discuss himself or his thoughts. While planning a robbery, Bigger realizes that his own fear and hate for his friend Gus. Because he knew that Gus was afraid, and even as he was, he feared Gus because he felt that Gus would consent, and then he would be compelled to go through with the robbery. As evidenced by his subsequent attack on Gus, Bigger is threatened by knowing someone could see his fear, and he lashes out. Mary Dalton is the far-left only child of a liberal, white philanthropic family. She is a free-spirited young lady who rebels against her parents politically. She is a communist sympathizer in a relationship with Jan Erlon, a member of the Communist Party. She uses her parents' capitalist wealth to support communist causes, despite her father's disapproval. Her position indicates that she is well-intentioned, yet extremely unaware of the privileges associated with both her whiteness and her wealth. During his first day as Dalton's chauffeur, Bigger brutally murders and then decapitates Mary early in the narrative. After he is jailed, Bigger confides that he knew what he was doing, all right. He couldn't help it. It was like another man stepped inside of his skin and started acting for him. He hated her then, and he hated her now. Moreover, she perceives herself to be Bigger's ally when she is ultimately his biggest nemesis. Bessie Mears is Bigger's girlfriend and second victim. Throughout the text, Bessie is left in the background. Her character is defined by the pain and suffering she experiences, both because of white racist capitalism and bigotomics, whom she drinks herself into loving and being satisfied with. Through her drunken lamentations, readers realize that Bessie and Bigger's relationship is circumstantial and trivial at best. They are together only because of their alcoholism and sexual relationship, and no other connection. There is no substance in it, and Bigger does not love her or see her humanity. Instead, he enlists her as an unwilling accessory to his crimes and callously murders her after he rapes her when she resists. She foreshadows her own sexual assault and murder when she says, "God only knows why I ever let you treat me this way. All you ever caused me was trouble. All you ever did since we've been knowing each other was to get me drunk so you could have me. I see it now. I ain't drunk now. I thought I was happy, but deep down in me, I knew I wasn't. But you got me into this murder, and I see it all now. I've been a fool, just a blind, dumb, black, drunk fool. Now I got to run away, and I know deep down in your heart, you don't really care." To the public, her murder as compared to Mary's murder is considered far less important or incriminating. Bigger even disassociates himself from his abuse of her. To readers, however, Bessie's brutal rape and murder is a more egregious act and is a clear evidence of Bigger's inhumanity and irredeemability. Unlike Mary, who represents white racist capitalism, Bessie is truly defenseless. Bigger even admits that he knows Mary's death would cause him to be sentenced to death, and that no one cared about Bessie, a poor black girl. Instead, white racists, like those in the courtroom during his trial, present her death as an example of his criminal capability instead of an additional criminal charge for first-degree murder. In truth, her brutal rape and murder show Bigger's callous nature and society's willful disregard for black bodies, especially black women. Throughout Native Son, Wright employs several characters as well as animals and weather as symbols. For instance, women are symbolic of the humanity and overall consciousness of their respective race. As a black woman, Bessie is devalued and abused by not only the outside white world, but also by other black men like Bigger Thomas. Similarly, Mary represents white femininity. She, like her parents, represent the wealthy white liberals who use philanthropy to appease their own guilt and make minstrels of the black people they claim to be helping. This sense of alarm is clear when the details of Mary's murder incite lynch mobs and a cry for justice and order, while Bessie's brutal slaying is met with little, if any, attention or empathy. Moreover, the natural world is used repeatedly to symbolize Bigger's hardships and life experiences. In addition to the rat, Wright also pins Bigger's crimes and later escape to take place in the winter. The snow is not only a recurring, unconquerable obstacle, but also a symbol of the toxic whiteness that surrounds and ultimately suppresses and suffocates him. Despite any of his efforts, it is not something he can physically or mentally transcend. Therefore, he futilely rages against it. Though written more than 70 years ago, Native Son maintains its relevance as not only a piece of African American literature, but also as social protest literature because its themes still hold true. It is not in some esoteric dystopian world. Instead, it is written in the south side of Chicago, Illinois, during the Great Depression. Men like Bigger Thomas continue to exist. Ghetto still exists as overpriced, poorly managed slums that are purposefully devoid of opportunity and are rampant with violence and inhumanity. Crime and lawlessness in these areas are often inevitable because doom and despair are the harsh realities that residents face. This despair comes as poor blacks understand that they are destitute, while wealthy whites who create these ghettos profit from not only their substandard living conditions, but also their exploited labor and misery.